Sir, that you were talking about Indian history being wrong, which we knew from a long time, still it is not rewritten. I would like to bring to your attention, there is a new book which you might have read, Dawn of Everything,
Okay.
which is challenging everything that has been written about the world history itself.
Who's the author, sir?
Some Greenbrier. So
Okay.
there are two authors, David Greenbrier and another Green. And 24,000 years back, the way people used to live, and they are finding more and more anthropologically.
Right.
And they are telling they were having a better civilization than what we thought it is.
Right.
And they are also telling the so-called philosophy developed by Hobbes and Rousseau was really developed by North Indians. And they were actually one, some Kondiarong or somebody like that one.
Okay.
And it is now just being written. So when are we going to see our history being studied like that, and we may find so many things which we are still not reading at all? That is number one. The number two, you have been so eloquent and trying to convince us. When are you going to, or are you thinking of giving up your lucrative job in the Supreme Court and coming down and taking up this one full time? When are you thinking of doing that?
So let me take the second question first. Never. Identity or those skill sets for anything under the sun. Simply because every person has to have a very clear picture as to who they are and why they are. When I entered law from engineering, I have said this before, I felt as if Atma was entering Sharir. It's a profession I dearly love. As someone who comes from, let's say, who's climbed the economic ladder and the social ladder the hard way, I am never ever going to give up the financial independence that I have derived as a consequence of my professional standing, which gives me the ability to effectively speak my mind without being beholden to any party or any organization. So I'm never going to give it up. 3, until the society values people who do this full time, I am never going to do this for anyone. I have seen how ungrateful the society has been to people who have done this full time for several generations. I must be an idiot to give it up. I will never do this. I carry the bitterness of a lot of people who have died bitter deaths despite their work and despite never being recognized by the community. The Muslim community is more grateful for the people who fight for Muslims. Hindus are ungrateful when it comes to people who fight for Hindus. That's a reality. Deal with that uncomfortable reality and swallow that bitter pill as a community. Everyone who stuck his neck out for you is isolated and always lonely. That's the reality. I am not going to be a fool. 3, my ability to fight the other side is because they know that I know my subject at least as well as they do, if not more. That time will decide. So giving it up also means giving up an important arsenal and astra in my, let's say, in my hands, in my quiver. Not happening. Now coming to the question of history, I don't have any hopes from any government anymore when it comes to history revision. But I'm happy that in general the society is more receptive to the works of authors like Vikram Sampath, to the works of authors like Dr. Subhash Kak. So there is a rising tide of Hindu dharmic awareness, which means it might translate to greater consumption of the content, even if it's put out through the alternate medium, which is through the publishing industry, not through the curriculum. I don't think I could have expected the sale of 1.25 lakh books on such a dry subject written by a lawyer in perhaps the most prosaic, archaic style possible 5 or 6 years ago. That shows that people are willing to consume this content despite my limitations in terms of being a free writer, which is to say, my prose doesn't flow as freely as Vikram's does. Because I write like a lawyer, 1, 2, 3, 4. The way I argue is how I write. The structure is also meant to be bullet, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's not meant to be for easy consumption in that sense. People cannot read my books, they have to study my books. I have changed that style of writing significantly in the second book. But still, what is my nature will remain my nature, because I am not going to compromise the strength of my ability to articulate for ease of communication beyond a point. Because then I lose the basic strength that I have. Three, the one good initiative that the government has come out with, and I will give credit where it is due, is the support for IKS centers across the country and universities across the country, which is Indic Knowledge System centers. It's been set up in my alma mater, IIT Kharagpur. It's been set up in several institutions in Karnataka. Across the country, it's been set up. So these clusters of fantastic talent pools across the country will hopefully generate the literature needed, as well as the policy to mainstream that literature. I think perhaps hopefully if the government has been thinking on the lines that I suspect they have, then this is a step in that particular direction. But the larger question would be, assume for a moment that the government were to come out with a fantastic new board called Indic Education Board or Dharmic Education Board. How many Hindus would subscribe to it? I am being trained in Hindu darshanas or Sanatana Darshana by a professor of Sanskrit from Kanchi Mahavishwavidyalaya. These are people who until 2 or 3 generations ago were in secular professions. They had a specific instruction from Mahapariva Sri Chandrasekhar Saraswati, chose to give it up, and they run on the basis of public contributions and only on the practice of the Veda. So I asked them, as someone who's gotten used to a certain lifestyle, I asked them, as a lawyer, I need a few, let's say, certainties in terms of where the revenue is going to come from and all that. How do you survive? Especially at a time when people are not exactly inviting people for yajnas and homas and all that. Their only dialogue and response was in Tamil, Vedam Kakkum, which is the Vedas will protect me. That is the group that needs protection at the end of the day, the so-called reviled evil Brahmin who is still fighting to protect the Veda with absolutely no support from anybody else. When I went there, a 6-year-old was being taught by an 8-year-old, an 8-year-old was being taught by a 13-year-old, a 13-year-old was being taught by a 15-year-old. That's the tree there. I was ashamed at my lack of knowledge. So I am putting my faith in such efforts by committed people who are into Bija Raksha in the truest nature, in the purest form, and a lot of people who still believe that there is still some value left in the practice of being a Vedic Brahmin in that sense. They are the only ones truly keeping the Anushtanas alive for all practical purposes. The day we have more and more people hoping that, okay, I think my child can do both. And from there they make the next step saying, my child will do only one thing and this is that. The day that transition happens, I would say, okay, finally the Hindu society has learned to be grateful to its own heritage and culture. Thank you. I have nothing more to say. Thank you so much.